The Kthar were not accustomed to failure. As silicon-based, crystalline life forms from the planet Chthon, they had evolved in a world of precise angles and predictable patterns. Their homeworld was a place of low gravity and geological stability, where life had developed along ordered, symmetrical lines. To them, Earth was nothing short of chaotic madness, a roiling, unpredictable mass of molten rock barely contained by a thin crust, covered in a messy film of organic material they considered more akin to mold than sentient life. Forlag, the lead xenogeologist of the expedition, observed Earth through the viewport of their craft as they descended toward the Kamchatka Peninsula. The craft shuddered slightly as they penetrated the atmosphere, causing minute vibrations that Forlag could feel through his crystalline form. Atmospheric turbulence exceeds predicted models by 13.7%. He noted, his voice a harmonious resonance that echoed slightly within the craft's chamber. Fascinating. The interplay between oceanic thermal currents and a volcanic outgassing creates more complex weather patterns than our simulation suggested. Beside him, Lyra's crystalline form shifted in what amounted to a Kthar expression of disapproval. As the security and pilot officer, and Forlag's mate, she viewed their mission with considerably less enthusiasm. Fascinating is not the term I would select, she responded, her resonance pitched higher in tension. Unpredictable atmospheric conditions increase mission risk factors. We should have selected a more stable region for our analysis. But that would defeat the purpose of our expedition, Forlag countered. The Xenological Institute specifically requested data on Earth's most geologically active regions. Kamchatka offers the optimal balance of activity and remoteness from human population centers. From the rear compartment of the craft, a younger, higher-pitched resonance joined the conversation. Will we see the liquid water formations? And the thermal vents? What about the carbon-based mobile organisms? Xyler, their offspring, equivalent to what humans would consider a preteen, vibrated with excitement that caused small rainbow refractions to dance across his crystalline surface. Unlike his parents, he had not yet developed the typical Kthar prejudice against biological life in unstructured environments. To him, Earth represented something thrillingly novel. You will remain within 5 meters of either your parent unit or the craft at all times, Lyra instructed firmly. This environment contains countless hazards for which your crystalline matrix is unsuited. The biological entities are unpredictable and potentially infectious. Xyler's vibrations dampened noticeably, but his curiosity remained undimmed. But how can I collect meaningful observational data from such limited proximity? Forlag intervened with what humans might have recognized as parental compromise. You may deploy a personal drone within standard parameters. 20-meter radius, constant biometric link, and automatic recall if environmental conditions shift beyond safety thresholds. This seemed to satisfy the young Kthar, whose vibrations resumed their excited frequency. Lyra said nothing, but adjusted the craft's descent vector with perhaps more precision than strictly necessary. As the Kthar landing craft descended through clouds toward the remote valley in Kamchatka, Alera Petrova was tracking a particularly elusive Siberian bighorn sheep through her binoculars. At 42, she had spent nearly 15 years in this wilderness as a wildlife biologist and conservation ranger. Her weathered face spoke of countless days under the open sky, and her movements through the difficult terrain were as natural as those of the animals she studied. Born to an Eidelman mother and Russian father, Alera had grown up straddling two worlds: the indigenous knowledge passed down through her mother's family and the scientific education she pursued with fierce determination. Now, she embodied both traditions, moving through the wilderness with an innate understanding while meticulously documenting her observations in digital field logs. She lowered her binoculars as a faint, unfamiliar sound reached her ears. It wasn't volcanic. She knew those rumblings intimately, nor was it any aircraft used by the research station or the infrequent tourists. Frowning, she packed her equipment and began moving toward a ridge that would give her a better vantage point. Whatever it was, it didn't belong here. And in Kamchatka, The unexpected was rarely benign. The landing did not go as planned. As the Cathar craft descended to approximately 500 meters above its designated landing zone, an unexpected solar flare created a surge of electromagnetic activity that interacted with Kamchatka's intense geothermal and magnetic fields. The combination produced interference beyond their shielding parameters. Primary navigation systems compromised, Lyra announced, her resonance sharp with alarm, switching to auxiliary guidance. But the auxiliary systems, calibrated for Chthon's stable environment, struggled to compensate for Earth's complex electromagnetic fields. When a specialized subterranean survey drone launched prematurely due to the interference, it created a catastrophic feedback loop. Drone malfunction, Forlag reported, his crystalline hands moving rapidly over the control interfaces. It's causing a cascade failure in our primary systems. Propulsion failing, Lyra added tensely. Atmospheric shielding at 62% and declining. Long-range communications offline. In the rear compartment, Xyler vibrated in the Cathar equivalent of fear, producing a high-pitched harmonic that his parents felt rather than heard. Initiating emergency landing protocols, Lyra declared. Forlag secures Xyler in the impact cushioning chamber. The craft, now barely under control, skimmed treetops and scraped against a rocky outcropping before skidding into a small clearing beside a rushing stream. The impact sent crystalline instrumentation shattering across the cabin. Emergency containment fields activated, preventing depressurization, but the damage was severe. The craft, designed for Chthon's pristine conditions, now lay partially embedded in Earth's chaotic soil, its sleek exterior marred and its systems critically damaged. For several minutes, silence reigned inside as automatic repair systems attempted to address the most critical failures. Then, with a harmonious tone that signaled the atmosphere within the craft had been stabilized, the Cathar began to move. Damage assessment, Forlag requested, helping Xyler from the cushioning chamber. Lyra integrated with the craft's diagnostic systems. Propulsion, non-functional. Long-range communications, non-functional. Life support, operating at 47% efficiency and declining. Our atmospheric processing will fail within 31 Earth hours. Widerstandet, Vorlag. The lead xenogeologist absorbed this information, his crystalline form refracting light in the patterns that indicated deep calculation. We must deploy the emergency beacon and establish defensive perimeters while awaiting extraction. The beacon was damaged in the crash, Lyra countered. It will require significant repairs before it can penetrate Earth's ionosphere. Forlag turned to examine their surroundings through the viewport. Then we must adapt to this environment temporarily. Prepare exterior exploration suits and defensive measures. We will salvage what we can and establish a secure position. I calculate our survival probability at 64.3%, declining by 3.2% with each Earth hour we remain exposed, Lyra stated flatly. Xyler, recovering from the shock of the crash, vibrated with a complex mix of fear and renewed curiosity. Will we encounter the biological entities of this region? We will avoid all unnecessary contact, Lyra answered firmly. Earth biologicals are classified as potentially hostile and certainly contaminating. But as they prepared to emerge from their damaged craft, none of the Cathar could predict just how close that contact would be, nor how it would challenge everything they believed about biological life and their place in the universe. Alara was close enough to see the craft crash. From her vantage point on the ridge, she had watched the strange, silvery object descend erratically, trailing sparks, before disappearing behind a stand of birch trees. The impact tremor reached her seconds later, not strong enough to be volcanic activity, but definitely a hard landing. Her first thought was a downed military aircraft or perhaps an unlicensed tourist helicopter. Either way, there might be injured people who needed help. She activated her satellite phone, but the screen showed no signal, unusual for her high-quality equipment. Frowning, she packed her essential gear and began making her way toward the crash site, moving with the efficient pace of someone who knew exactly how to navigate the difficult terrain. As Alara approached, staying downwind and using the trees for cover out of habitual caution, she realized this was no aircraft she recognized. The silvery hull had an almost liquid quality despite being clearly solid, with no visible seams or rivets. It reflected the surrounding forest in distorted patterns, and what she had taken for damage appeared more like crystalline growths emerging from the structure itself. And then the craft opened, not with a door or hatch, but by a section of the hull, simply becoming transparent and then disappearing altogether. What emerged froze Alara in her tracks. 3 figures moved with careful precision, their bodies composed of what appeared to be living crystal. They walked upright on 2 legs, with 2 upper limbs and a head-like structure, but the similarities to humans ended there. Their forms caught the sunlight and refracted it in rainbow patterns, and they moved with a strange, deliberate grace that suggested they found Earth's gravity challenging. They wore no clothing as humans would recognize it, but sections of their bodies were covered with what appeared to be technology, thin, silvery bands that pulsed with light. Alara had spent years observing wild animals without disturbing them, and these skills now kept her hidden as she watched the crystalline beings examine their surroundings. 2 were clearly adults, while the third was smaller, perhaps a child. One of the adults deployed small, floating devices that began scanning the area, while the other established what appeared to be a perimeter around their craft, using devices that emitted faint, shimmering fields. The smaller one, the child, Alara decided, seemed to vibrate with what she could only interpret as excitement, moving toward a cluster of wildflowers with what looked like scanning equipment. The larger of the adults immediately pulled it back with a sharp gesture. Alara weighed her options. These were clearly extraterrestrial visitors, something she'd never truly believed she would encounter in her lifetime. The rational part of her mind suggested retreating and contacting authorities, but her satellite phone was still not functioning. More importantly, something about their movements suggested distress. Their craft was damaged, and they appear to be struggling with Earth's environment. Taking a deep breath, Alara stepped from her hiding place, moving slowly into the open with her empty hands clearly visible. The reaction was immediate. The adult who had established the perimeter raised what could only be a weapon, while the one who had been scanning stepped in front of the child. A shimmering energy field sprang up between them and Alara, who stopped advancing and simply stood her ground. "I mean no harm," she said clearly, keeping her voice calm and steady, as she would when encountering a potentially dangerous predator. "I saw your craft crash. I'm here to help if I can." For a moment, nothing happened. Then the one who seemed to be the leader activated a small device that projected light in complex patterns. After several seconds, it spoke, the sound not coming from the crystalline being itself, but from the device. Biological entity identified. Primitive hominid species Homo sapiens. Threat assessment moderate. Contamination risk high. The translation was clearly not meant for Alara's benefit, and she realized they were analyzing her. She tried again. "My name is Alara Petrova. I'm a scientist and ranger in this region. Your craft appears damaged. Do you require assistance?" This time, the leader seemed to direct its device toward her deliberately. After a moment, it spoke again, and this time she felt certain it was attempting communication. Biological designation Alara Petrova acknowledged. "This unit is Forlag, Xenological Survey Team Leader. We require no biological assistance. Depart from our perimeter." The translation was stilted and cold, but Alara had achieved her first goal, establishing communication. She was about to respond when the ground beneath them gave a low rumble. The crystalline beings vibrated in what seemed like alarm, but Alara recognized the signs immediately. "Mud pot," she said urgently, pointing to their right where the ground was beginning to bubble. "Move away from that area. Now." Either they didn't understand or chose to ignore her warning, because none of them moved. Seconds later, a geyser of superheated, acidic mud erupted from the bubbling ground, spattering the perimeter only meters from where they stood. The energy field sizzled where the mud struck it, and the smaller being emitted a high-pitched sound that made Alara wince. "Your position is unsafe," she called, pointing to higher ground. "That's a geothermal feature. It makes the ground unstable and produces acid that might damage your bodies." The leader, Forelag, conferred briefly with the other adult, their bodies producing harmonics that Alara felt more than heard. Finally, Forelag addressed her again. "Your biological knowledge of this region is relevant. Identify safe proximity zones." "Progress," Alara thought. She gestured to a rocky outcropping about 50 meters from their position. "That area is stable. No geothermal activity, good visibility, defensible position." She deliberately used terms that security-minded visitors would appreciate. The adult who had raised the weapon, presumably some kind of security officer, conducted scans of the indicated area, then nodded to Forelag. With visible reluctance, they began moving their essential equipment toward the outcropping, maintaining their defensive posture toward Alara the entire time. As they relocated, Alara noticed that their movements seemed increasingly labored. Their crystalline bodies appeared to be developing a fine mist on their surfaces, condensation from Earth's humid atmosphere, she realized. Their technology, too, seemed to be struggling, with the perimeter field flickering and their scanning devices producing erratic readings. Once they reached the outcropping, Forelag addressed her again. "Biological Alara Petrova, you exhibit knowledge of environmental hazards beyond expected parameters for your species. Explain function." Alara smiled slightly at the awkward phrasing. "I'm a wildlife biologist and conservation ranger. I've lived in this region for 15 years, studying the ecosystem and protecting endangered species. I know this land intimately, its dangers and its patterns." The security officer interrupted with a series of harmonic tones, which Forelag acknowledged before turning back to Alara. "I'm Forelag, lead xenogeologist. This is Lyra, security and pilot officer. Our offspring unit is designated Xyler. We are Cthar from the planet Chthon. Our research vessel has sustained critical damage due to unexpected electromagnetic anomalies in your planet's unstable atmosphere and geological structure." It was the most information they'd shared so far, and Alara recognized it as a significant shift in their attitude, from dismissal to reluctant engagement. "Your vessel could be repaired?" she asked. "Negative," Lyra interjected, the translation device giving her words a sharp, clipped quality. "Primary systems are irreparable with available resources. We have activated an emergency beacon, but signal penetration through your planet's ionosphere is minimal. Extraction timeline uncertain." As if to emphasize their predicament, the sky darkened with approaching storm clouds, a typical afternoon pattern in the Kamchatka summer. The temperature was already dropping, and Alara could see that the Cthar were reacting poorly to the changing conditions, their crystalline forms becoming less luminous. "A storm is coming," she said. "The temperature will drop significantly, and there will be electrical discharge, lightning, that could interfere with your technology or damage your forms." She hesitated, then committed to the offer she'd been considering. "I have a research station approximately 3 kilometers from here. It has stable power, communication equipment, and shelter from the elements. You would be safer there while awaiting rescue." The Cthar conferred among themselves again, their harmonic language creating an eerie, beautiful resonance that seemed to vibrate the very air. Alara waited patiently, knowing they faced a difficult choice between trusting a biological or risking exposure to Earth's harsh elements. Finally, Forelag turned to her. "We will evaluate your research station as a temporary operating base. Let us, biological Alara Petrova, but be advised that Lyra will maintain defensive capabilities at maximum readiness." As they gathered their essential equipment and prepared to move, Alara noticed the youngest Cthar, Xyler, studying her with what she could only interpret as intense curiosity. Despite having no facial features she could recognize, the young alien's posture and movements conveyed a sense of wonder that transcended species boundaries. The journey to Alara's research station was arduous for the Cthar. Built for the low gravity of Chthon, They struggled with Kamchatka's rugged terrain. What would have been a moderate hike for humans was clearly taxing for their crystalline physiology. Alara slowed her pace to accommodate them, choosing the easiest path possible while avoiding known geothermal hazards. The weather deteriorated rapidly. Wind-driven rain began to fall, causing visible distress to the Kthar. Their crystalline surfaces developed a cloudy appearance where the raindrops struck, and their movements became increasingly labored. Forlag explained, via the translation device, that Earth's water contained mineral impurities that interfered with their crystalline resonance, while the higher oxygen content of the atmosphere required constant filtering by their technological interfaces. About halfway to the station, they encountered their first major obstacle, a swift-flowing stream swollen by recent rains. For Alara, it would have been a challenging but manageable ford. For the Kthar, with their apparent sensitivity to water, it presented a serious barrier. This water contains high levels of dissolved minerals and organic particulates, Forlag observed, scanning the stream. Direct contact would contaminate our outer matrices and potentially disrupt our internal resonance. Alara assessed the situation quickly. There's a fallen tree about 50 meters upstream that could serve as a bridge. It would keep you above the water. Lyra conducted her own scan. The biological solution is acceptable. Proceed. As they carefully made their way along the stream bank, Xyler lagged slightly behind, clearly fascinated by the moving water, something non-existent on their geologically stable homeworld. Alara noticed the young Kthar, dipping a small collection device into the stream, presumably taking samples. Xyler, Lyra called sharply when she noticed. Maintain formation. Unnecessary sample collection is not authorized. But Parent Lyra, the young Kthar protested, voice resonating with excitement. The liquid matrix contains suspended microbiological entities in suspension networks of remarkable complexity. They're communicating through chemical exchanges. You mean the bacteria and algae? Alara asked, intrigued by the Kthar perspective. Xyler vibrated in what she was beginning to recognize as affirmation. Yes, your terminology is imprecise, but yes. They form communal structures that adapt to resource availability and environmental shifts. It's a form of distributed intelligence, unlike anything in our databases. Forlag interrupted. Xyler's observations, while scientifically valid, are not mission-critical. We must reach shelter before our atmospheric filters degrade further. They continued on, crossing the stream via the fallen tree. The Kthar moved with careful precision, clearly uncomfortable with the rushing water below them. As they neared the far bank, Xyler paused, attention caught by movement in the vegetation. A small ermine, its coat in the brown phase of summer, emerged cautiously from the underbrush. It assessed the strange procession with alert black eyes, whiskers twitching as it processed their unfamiliar scent. Xyler froze, vibrating with what Alara recognized as excitement. The young Kthar slowly extended a scanning device, careful not to make sudden movements. The ermine, rather than fleeing, displayed curiosity of its own. It approached cautiously, sniffing the air, before darting forward to investigate a small, shiny object Xyler had dropped. The moment was brief but profound. Two young beings from entirely different evolutionary paths, sharing a moment of mutual curiosity. Alara watched Xyler's reaction carefully, noting how the young alien's vibrations changed to a gentler, almost harmonious pattern. A juvenile Mustela erminia, she said softly. A predatory mammal, but this one is young, still learning its place in the ecosystem. It employs chemical sensory apparatus to evaluate us, Xyler observed with wonder, and optical processing to assess movement patterns. Multiple redundant information gathering systems in a mobile, self-replicating biological entity. Fascinating. The ermine, having satisfied its curiosity, darted back into the underbrush. Xyler remained motionless, scanning devices still active, clearly processing the encounter. Xyler, Lyra called impatiently. Maintain formation. The biological entity could have been hazardous. It was gathering data, Parent Lyra. As was I. Mutual scientific investigation. Alara suppressed a smile at what sounded remarkably like a universal parent-child interaction, transcending species boundaries. As they resumed their journey, the sky darkened further and distant thunder rumbled across the valley. The Kthar reacted with alarm to the sound, their forms vibrating in what Alara interpreted as distress. Atmospheric electrical discharge, Forlag noted, scanning the clouds. Potentially damaging to our communications equipment and resonance stabilizers. We need to hurry, Alara confirmed. My station is just beyond that ridge. We'll be there in 20 minutes if we maintain our pace. They pressed on through the intensifying rain, the Kthar visibly struggling with the conditions but determined to reach shelter. Alara found herself impressed by their resilience despite their obvious physiological challenges in Earth's environment. They were clearly a spacefaring species with advanced technology, yet they were as vulnerable on her world as she would undoubtedly be on theirs, a humbling thought that reinforced the fundamental lesson of her years in the wilderness. Every being must respect the environment in which it finds itself. When they finally crested the ridge, Alara's research station came into view, a sturdy, modern structure designed to withstand Kamchatka's harsh conditions while maintaining a minimal environmental footprint. Solar panels, supplemented by a small geothermal tap, provided reliable power, while satellite communications equipment on the roof linked her to the outside world. The station's main building was flanked by a small greenhouse and equipment shed, the whole complex nestled into the landscape to minimize wind exposure. "We have arrived," she announced, leading them down the final slope as lightning split the sky overhead. "Inside, you'll be protected from the elements, and I can help you establish communications with your people." The Kthar said nothing, but their relief was evident in the way their vibrations synchronized into a harmonious resonance that Alara felt in her chest more than heard with her ears. As they approached the station's entrance, the first heavy drops of rain became a downpour, and thunder crashed directly overhead. Safe within the sturdy walls of the research station, the Kthar carefully removed their damaged atmospheric filters and began making repairs. Alara gave them space, busying herself with routine tasks while covertly observing their interactions. Their crystalline bodies, now visible without the additional technology, were even more fascinating than she had initially realized. They contained intricate internal structures that pulsed with light in complex patterns, suggesting a physiology based on energy resonance rather than biological processes. Forlag approached her as she checked her meteorological equipment. "Your shelter exceeds expected parameters for biological construction. The design efficiently mitigates environmental hazards while minimizing resource expenditure." Coming from the Kthar, Alara recognized this as high praise. "Thank you. It was designed to be sustainable and resilient. The geothermal tap provides stable power regardless of weather conditions, and the structure is insulated against both cold and electromagnetic interference. The electromagnetic shielding is particularly relevant to our needs," Forlag acknowledged. "It may enhance our beacon signal enough to penetrate your ionosphere." "You're welcome to interface with my communications array," Alara offered. "It's designed to cut through even severe atmospheric disturbances." While Forlag and Lyra worked to adapt their technology to Alara's equipment, Xyler explored the station with undisguised curiosity, scanning everything from Alara's field journals to her collection of geological specimens. The young Kthar seemed particularly fascinated by her botanical samples and the small ecosystem monitoring tanks, where she kept various microorganisms for study. "These biological entities in the transparent containment unit," Xyler asked, resonating with excitement, "they convert light energy directly into structural components?" "Yes, that's photosynthesis," Alara explained, pleased by the young alien's scientific curiosity. "The algae capture solar energy and use it to convert carbon dioxide and water into glucose and oxygen. An elegant energy transfer system," Xyler observed. "On Cthon, energy is absorbed and channeled directly through crystalline lattices. We have no equivalent to this chemical conversion process." As the storm raged outside, Alara prepared a simple meal for herself, explaining the process to an intrigued Xyler. The concept of consuming other organisms for energy was clearly foreign and somewhat disturbing to the young Cthar, who absorbed energy directly from ambient radiation and minerals. Lyra watched these interactions with visible caution, her form positioned to intervene if necessary. But as the hours passed without incident, even she seemed to relax marginally, focusing on repairing their damaged equipment. By evening, the storm had passed, leaving behind a clear sky filled with stars. Forlag had successfully interfaced their beacon with Alara's communications array, significantly boosting its signal strength. Beacon signal now penetrating ionosphere, he announced with evident satisfaction. Extraction team will receive coordinates within 2.7 of your Earth days. That's good news, Alara responded. You're welcome to remain here until they arrive. It's safer than returning to your damaged craft. Forlag conferred briefly with Lyra before responding. Your offer is appreciated. We will accept temporary sanctuary while monitoring beacon confirmation. As night deepened, Alara explained her need for sleep, another biological function that fascinated Xyler. The Cthar required periods of energy conservation, but not unconsciousness as humans understood it. While you engage in biological regeneration, we will continue repairs and data analysis, Forlag explained. Your workspace will not be disturbed. Alara nodded, setting up her sleeping arrangements in the main room rather than her private quarters, sensing that her presence, even while sleeping, somehow reassured the stranded aliens. Before settling down, she checked her monitoring equipment one last time, a habit ingrained by years of wilderness living. I need to check my remote sensors tomorrow morning, she mentioned to Forlag. There's one station about 2 kilometers from here that might have been damaged in the storm. The path passes through the territory of a large male brown bear I've been studying for several years. A predatory biological entity? Lyra asked sharply, her resonance shifting to what Alara now recognized as alert concern. Yes, but not an immediate threat if we observe proper protocols. Mikhail, that's my name for him, knows me by sight and scent. He tolerates my presence as long as I respect his boundaries. We'll need to move quietly, stay together, and I'll tell you if any specific behaviors are necessary. Lyra seemed skeptical. Your protocols for coexisting with predatory entities seem inadequate. We should deploy sonic deterrents and energy barriers. That would be a mistake, Alara cautioned. Unfamiliar sounds or energy emissions might read as threatening rather than deterring. Bears have complex responses to perceived threats, and Mikhail is particularly territorial. Trust me on this. I've encountered him dozens of times without incident. Forlag intervened before Lyra could object further. We will follow your guidance regarding indigenous biological entities. Your experiential data is relevant to our survival in this environment. With that tentative agreement established, Alara settled into her sleeping bag, acutely aware of the 3 crystalline beings quietly moving about her station, their forms casting prismatic patterns on the walls as they passed through moonlight streaming through the windows. Despite the extraordinary circumstances, she felt a profound sense of privilege, to be perhaps the first human to encounter an extraterrestrial species, and to find, despite their profound differences, a basis for communication and mutual respect. Morning arrived with the characteristic clarity of post-storm Kamchatka, the air crystalline in its purity, visibility extending for kilometers across the dramatic landscape. Alara rose early, finding the Cthar in what appeared to be a communal energy conservation state. Their crystalline forms oriented toward the rising sun, internal structures pulsing with absorbed light. Forlag acknowledged her awakening. The beacon signal has been received. Extraction preparations are underway. Estimated arrival, 26.3 of your hours. Excellent, Alara responded, beginning her morning routine. That gives us time to check the damaged sensor station. The data it collects is vital for my research on regional wildlife movement patterns. After a light breakfast, which Xyler observed with continued fascination, they prepared for the expedition. Alara packed her standard field kit, including bear spray, a precaution she explained to the concerned Kthar. This contains capsaicin, an inflammatory compound that temporarily overwhelms mammalian sensory organs without causing permanent damage. I've never had to use it on Mikhail, but proper preparation is essential in the wilderness. Lyra, unconvinced, activated her defensive technology, subtle energy fields that shimmered almost invisibly around the Kthar. We will maintain minimal defensive capabilities, non-aggressive but sufficient for biological deterrence. Alara didn't argue, recognizing the security officers need to protect her family unit. They set out under ideal conditions. Cool morning air, excellent visibility, and dry ground underfoot after the night's clear weather. The Kthar moved more confidently today, having adapted somewhat to Earth's gravity and atmospheric conditions. The path to the sensor station wound through a mixed landscape of birch forest and open meadows rich with summer flowers. Xyler vibrated with excitement at every new organism they encountered, from buzzing bees to a distant hawk circling overhead. Alara found herself pointing out features of the ecosystem that human might take for granted, but that clearly amazed the young Kthar. The symbiotic relationships between flowering plants and pollinators, the communication methods of ground squirrels, the patterns of tree growth in response to prevailing winds. Your ecosystem contains millions of specialized biological entities, all operating without centralized control, yet maintaining homeostatic balance. Forlag observed with clear scientific interest. Our initial assessment of Earth's biosphere as merely chaotic appears incomplete. Life here has had billions of years to evolve interdependencies, Alara explained. What looks like chaos is actually a complex web of relationships, each species adapting to fill specific niches and respond to environmental pressures. As they approached a stream crossing, a shallow ford this time, manageable even for the water-averse Kthar, Alara raised her hand for silence. Fresh bare tracks marked the muddy bank, large enough to belong to only one individual in this territory. Mikhail has been here recently, she whispered, pointing to the tracks. We need to be especially alert from here on. Make noise as we walk. Bears don't like surprises. Stay close together to appear as a single, larger entity. They proceeded with heightened caution, the Kthar clearly uncomfortable but following Alara's instructions. She maintained a steady flow of calm conversation, occasionally calling out, "Hey, bear," to announce their presence, a practice that had served her well for years. The sensor station came into view as they rounded a bend in the path, a small, weatherproof structure mounted on a metal pole, equipped with cameras, weather instruments, and wildlife monitoring technology. As Alara had feared, it showed signs of storm damage, with one solar panel hanging loose and a satellite uplink antenna bent at an awkward angle. "This won't take long to repair," she said, removing tools from her pack. "Please stay together while I work." The Kthar observed with interest as she quickly and efficiently diagnosed and addressed each problem. Forlag even offered suggestions for improving the power efficiency of the damaged solar array, which Alara implemented gratefully. As she secured the last connection and verified the system was operational again, Xyler's attention was drawn to movement at the forest edge approximately 50 meters away. There, partially obscured by berry-laden bushes, stood Mikhail, 900 pounds of Ushuri brown bear, his coat gleaming copper in the morning sun as he foraged for ripe berries. The young Kthar vibrated with intense scientific curiosity. This was the apex predator Alara had discussed, a perfect example of evolved biological efficiency. Without alerting the adults, who were focused on the sensor repairs, Xyler activated a comprehensive scanning array and began moving slowly toward the forest edge, seeking better readings of this fascinating organism. Alara, closing the access panel on the sensor station, glanced up just in time to see Xyler separating from the group. "Xyler," she called in an urgent whisper. "Stop! Come back immediately!" The young Kthar either didn't hear or chose to ignore the warning, continuing to advance with scanner extended. Mikhail, alerted by the unfamiliar sound of the scanning device, raised his massive head from the berry bush and focused directly on the approaching crystalline entity. Forelag and Lyra, now aware of the situation, reacted instantly. Lyra activated her defensive systems, a shimmering energy field expanding around her as she moved rapidly toward Xyler. Forelag began preparing what appeared to be a geological disruption device, designed to create minor seismic vibrations that might distract or deter the approaching biological threat. Mikhail, however, reacted before either Kthar could reach their offspring. With a warning huff that carried clearly across the clearing, the massive bear rose to his full height, nearly 3 meters tall on his hind legs, and took a tentative step toward the strange crystalline intruder in his territory. Xyler, suddenly aware of the danger, froze in place. The young Kthar's scanning device continued to emit a high-pitched whine that only agitated Mikhail further. The bear dropped to all fours and charged forward in a false rush. A warning behavior Alara recognized immediately, but which the Kthar interpreted as an attack. Sonic deterrent activated, Lyra announced, her protective instincts in full control. A piercing, high-frequency sound erupted from her defensive equipment, designed to overwhelm sensitive neural systems. But Earth's apex predators had not evolved in response to Kthar's sonic technology. Instead of retreating, Mikhail roared in confusion and pain, the unfamiliar sound driving him not away but into a defensive aggression. The false charge became real, his powerful legs propelling 900 pounds of muscle and claw directly toward the young Kthar. Xyler remained motionless, Alara shouted, even as she began moving purposefully toward the unfolding disaster. Lyra, seeing the sonic deterrent fail, escalated to an energy pulse, a focused beam of disruptive energy that would have immediately incapacitated any Chthon predator. It struck Mikhail squarely in the shoulder, but the bear's thick hide and layer of fat absorbed the impact with minimal effect. The energy dissipated in a brief shimmer of light that only served to further confuse and enrage the animal. Forelag activated his geological disruptor, causing the ground near Mikhail to vibrate unnaturally. On Chthon, such a technique would signal dangerous structural instability that any sensible creature would avoid. On Earth, to a bear already committed to a charge, it was merely another incomprehensible threat in an escalating situation. Your technology is escalating his threat response, Alara called urgently. Deactivate everything now. But it was too late. Mikhail reached Xyler in seconds, massive jaws closing around the young Kthar's arm with a pressure that would have crushed human bone instantly. Xyler's crystalline structure held, but hairline fractures began to form, and the young alien emitted a high-frequency distress signal that made Alara's teeth ache. Lyra prepared to fire a lethal energy burst, one that might seriously injure or kill Mikhail, when Alara did something that shocked all 3 Kthar into momentary stillness. She stepped forward, directly into the space between predator and prey. "Hey, Misha," she said, her voice low, calm, and conversational, using the affectionate diminutive she sometimes employed when observing him. She kept her eyes slightly averted, her posture relaxed but confident. She made no sudden movements, no aggressive gestures. "That's not food. That's not a threat. Just something strange, yes? Something you don't understand." The bear, jaws still clamped on Xyler's arm, focused one dark eye on the familiar human female. Recognition flickered there, not the recognition of conscious thought as humans understood it, but the deep, instinctual recognition of a known quantity in his environment. Alara had observed Mikhail for years, and while he was no tame animal, he had come to associate her scent and voice with non-threatening encounters. "That's it. You know me," she continued in the same calm tone, slowly reaching into her pocket. The Kthar watched in tense silence, Lyra's weapon still trained on the bear, but not firing. "Look what I have here." She withdrew a handful of dried berries, the same species Mikhail had been foraging when interrupted. With deliberate slowness, she tossed them a short distance away, not at the bear but to the side, giving him an option, an alternative focus. Mikhail's sensitive nose twitched. His grip on Xyler loosened slightly as his attention divided between the strange crystalline thing in his mouth, the familiar human female, and the scent of concentrated food nearby. That's right. Why bother with something you can't eat when there's perfectly good food right there? Let go now. Let go and we'll all just walk away. No threat to you. No threat to your territory. The bear's jaw pressure lessened further. Xyler remained absolutely still, following Alera's earlier command with perfect discipline despite what must have been an excruciating experience. Forelag and Lyra likewise held their positions, recognizing that any movement or technological intervention now might shatter the delicate balance Alera had created. With a final, confused huff, Mikhail opened his jaws completely, releasing Xyler from his grip. The young Thar did not move, did not attempt to flee. The bear took a step back, still watching all of them warily, then turned his attention to the dried berries Alera had tossed aside. After consuming them in a few quick bites, he gave the assembled group one final, dismissive glance before turning and ambling back toward the berry bushes of the forest edge, apparently deciding that these strange visitors were neither threat nor food, and thus not worth his continued attention. Only when Mikhail had disappeared into the trees did Lyra rush forward to Xyler, her crystalline form vibrating with an emotion that needed no translation: parental fear and relief. Forelag followed more slowly, his scientific mind clearly struggling to process what he had just witnessed. Alera approached cautiously, giving the Kthar family space for their reunion. Is Xyler damaged? I have a first aid kit, though I'm not sure how effective it would be for your physiology. Lyra completed a scan of her offspring, the results visible as patterns of light across her own form. Minor crystalline fractures detected. Self-repair systems functioning at 78% efficiency. Estimated complete recovery, 3.4 hours. She looked up at Alera, her crystalline structure refracting light in patterns that somehow conveyed both lingering fear and grudging respect. Your intervention was effective. How did you neutralize an apex predator without technology? I didn't neutralize him, Alera explained, watching the forest edge to ensure Mikhail truly had departed. I communicated with him, not with language as you and I are using, but through body language, tone, and offering an alternative that satisfied his immediate interests. Mikhail and I have a relationship built on mutual recognition and respect for boundaries. Relationship, Forelag repeated, as if testing an unfamiliar concept. You claim a sustained, reciprocal interaction pattern with a non-sapient predatory organism. Yes, Alera confirmed, though I wouldn't say non-sapient so definitively. Bears have complex minds, not like humans or Kthar, certainly, but they learn, remember, problem-solve, and make decisions based on past experiences. Mikhail recognizes me as a specific individual he has encountered many times without hostile outcome. That's a form of relationship. Xyler, recovering from the shock of the encounter, vibrated with what Alera had come to interpret as intense curiosity. The predator could have easily terminated me, yet it chose restraint when presented with alternative options. That suggests advanced decision-making capabilities beyond base instinct. Exactly, Alera agreed. Earth's biological life forms aren't just chaotic or instinct-driven. They're adapted to their environments through millions of years of evolution, and many higher vertebrates like Mikhail have considerable cognitive flexibility. They made their way back to the research station in thoughtful silence, each processing the encounter in their own way. Once safely inside, the Kthar engaged in an intense discussion in their harmonic language while Alera gave them privacy, busying herself with uploading the recovered sensor data. Eventually, Forelag approached her workstation. Your intervention saved Xyler from significant damage. The Kthar acknowledged this debt. There's no debt, Alera replied sincerely. I couldn't stand by and watch anyone be harmed, human, Kthar, or bear, if I could help prevent it. Nevertheless, Forelag insisted, your actions and knowledge merit scientific recognition. Our initial assessment of Earth's biological systems as merely chaotic and inefficient requires significant revision. Over the remaining hours of the Kthar stay, A remarkable shift occurred in their interactions. Lyra, while still vigilant, engaged Alara in detailed discussions about Earth's predator-prey dynamics and territorial behaviors. Forlag shared Cthar geological scanning data that revealed deep structures beneath Kamchatka's surface that even the most advanced human technology had not yet mapped. And Xyler asked endless questions about Earth's ecosystems, particularly the complex interdependencies that maintained ecological balance. Alara, in turn, demonstrated how she lived in harmony with the environment. Using geothermal energy, practicing sustainable food cultivation in her small greenhouse, and employing non-invasive wildlife monitoring techniques. The Cthar, with their advanced understanding of energy systems, helped her improve the efficiency of her solar arrays and geothermal tap, increasing her station's power output by nearly 30%. As the extraction deadline approached, Forlag received confirmation that a Cthar rescue craft had entered Earth's atmosphere and would reach their location within the hour. The three aliens gathered their remaining equipment and prepared for departure. Before we leave, Forlag announced formally, "We wish to present you with data exchange, as is Cthar custom when encountering entities of scientific significance." From a specialized container, he produced a crystal unlike any Alara had seen, multifaceted and glowing with an inner light that shifted through colors beyond the human visual spectrum. This contains comprehensive geological and atmospheric data collected during our expedition, including deep scans of the region's volcanic structures and mineral compositions. This information exceeds your current technological capabilities and may assist in predicting geological events that would otherwise endanger biological populations. Lyra stepped forward next, her crystalline form refracting light in patterns that Alara had learned to interpret as solemn respect. She offered a small device that resembled a highly advanced multi-tool. This implements Cthar efficiency principles in a form compatible with your biological limitations. It will function for approximately 157 of your years without power replenishment. Finally, Xyler approached, vibrating with what was clearly excitement. "I have nothing of technological significance to offer, but I have composed a crystalline resonance pattern based on the harmonics of your forest ecosystem. The combined acoustic signatures of wind through trees, water over stone, and animal vocalizations. When activated, it will reproduce these harmonics in a form perceptible to your auditory system." The young Cthar handed Alara a small crystal that fit comfortably in her palm. When she touched it gently, it emitted a sound of such profound beauty that tears came to her eyes. The essence of Kamchatka's wilderness distilled into pure harmonic resonance. "Thank you," she said when she could speak again. "These are extraordinary gifts." She considered what she could offer in return, finally reaching for a small pouch she kept on a shelf near her geological specimens. From it, she withdrew a perfectly formed piece of obsidian, volcanic glass created in Kamchatka's fiery heart. "This was formed in the aftermath of an eruption 5 years ago," she explained, presenting it to Forlag. "It represents what you came to study, the geological forces that shape this region. But it's also a product of the very chaos you initially viewed as merely destructive. Without that volcanic activity, this beautiful structure could not exist. Sometimes what appears as disorder from one perspective is actually a necessary process of creation and renewal." Forlag accepted the obsidian with a formal gesture, his crystalline form refracting light in patterns that conveyed deep contemplation. "An insightful perspective. The Cthar will analyze this specimen and your philosophical framework with equal attention." A subtle vibration passed through the air, not sound as humans perceived it, but a harmonic resonance that the Cthar clearly recognized. Their extraction craft had arrived. "It is time," Lyra announced. "The rescue vessel has established position above the clearing." They moved outside, where a shimmering field of energy was descending from the clouds, a transportation beam rather than a physical craft. Before stepping into it, Forlag turned to Alara one final time. "Biological Alara Petrova," he said, his translator device giving the words a formal weight, the Cthar's Xenological Institute will receive a revised assessment of Earth biosphere based on our observations. Your demonstration of what we now classify as ecological intelligence, the ability to comprehend and integrate within complex, apparently chaotic systems, represents a form of cognition the Cthar had not previously recognized as valid. This recalibrates our understanding of intelligence itself. Perhaps, Elara suggested with a smile, the greatest danger isn't the environment, but misunderstanding one's place within it. Whether that environment is a wilderness like Kamchatka or the vast universe we all share. The Cthar vibrated in what she now recognized as agreement. Then, with a final harmonic tone that somehow conveyed both farewell and respect, they stepped into the energy field and were drawn upward, disappearing into the clouds. Elara watched until the last shimmer of energy faded from view, then returned to her station, outwardly unchanged, yet inwardly transformed by the encounter. Months later, in a vast crystalline chamber on Cthon, Forlag stood before the assembled members of the Cthar Xenological Institute. Behind him, complex holographic displays showed images of Earth, its roiling geological activity, its diverse biospheres, and, prominently, Elara Petrova standing calmly between a young Cthar and an Earth predator. Our initial assessment of Earth as merely chaotic and hostile requires fundamental revision, Forlag stated, his resonance carrying to every corner of the chamber. What we classified as unpredictable instability, Earth's biological entities have adapted to through processes more sophisticated than previously understood. He displayed detailed analyses of the bare encounter, highlighting the failure of Cthar technology against the success of Elara's knowledge-based intervention. The human demonstrated what we now term ecological intelligence, the capacity to comprehend and function within systems of such complexity that they appear chaotic to outside observers. Forlag continued, presenting extensive data on Earth's ecosystems, the interdependencies between species, and the way geological activity, rather than merely threatening life, actually created conditions that drove biological adaptation and diversity. We propose a new research initiative, he concluded, focused not on imposing order upon apparently chaotic systems, but on understanding the complex order that already exists within them. The universe contains forms of stability we have not recognized because they do not resemble our own. His final projection showed a Cthar rendering of Elara in the moment she stood between Xyler and Mikhail, a small biological entity positioned between crystalline technology and raw natural force, somehow balancing both through understanding rather than power. The caption beneath it read simply, "Intelligence adapts. Survival integrates." In that moment, on a crystalline world light years from Earth, the Cthar began to reconsider their fundamental assumptions about life, intelligence, and their place in a universe far more complex and far more wondrous than they had previously allowed themselves to perceive.